Most love stories start the same way. Childhood friends who grew up together, love letters in her locker, walking home together after school, yada yada. This game is no different. There's a girl you've known your whole life. She's Ako, your childhood best friend. She's sweet, warm, and is always there for you, even walking home from school together almost every day. Naturally, you fell in love with her. I mean, who doesn't? A cute childhood friend that has a sweet personality. You also get this feeling that maybe, just maybe, she feels the same way you do. Well, she did, but perhaps it would be better if she did not have the same feeling. This is Ako, a Yandere Love Story, RPG maker horror romance game by AkoGameDev. And it's a story about what happens when a sweetest person you know decides that loving you means never letting you go. You are a high school student, and you just found a love letter in your locker. This isn't the first time. Every day, your locker is filled with letters from a mysterious, strange girl who refuses to confess to you in person. Normally, a guy would be happy about that, but not you, because your heart is already set on Ako, your childhood best friend, while you're lost in thought, trying to figure out who the mysterious girl is. Ako approaches and asks what you're doing, forcing you to quickly hide the letters. In your head, you admit you originally thought the letters might be from Ako, but when you brought it up once, she had no idea what you were talking about. Since then, you've made a habit of keeping the letters hidden out of her sight. Despite all of that, you're convinced Ako has feelings for you too. Once you deal with the mysterious girl, whom you refer to in your head as the anonymous harasser, you plan to ask Ako out on a date. As usual, you and Ako walk home together. Along the way, you talk about the culture festival coming up in a couple of weeks before eventually having to part ways at an intersection. Before going your separate ways, you work up the nerve to invite Ako out to eat in a restaurant. But even though Ako clearly wants to say yes, you both know she can't. Her parents are strict. Back home, you go straight to bed to rest, where you get a message from Ako with a photo of a black cat sitting in front of her house. You're happy seeing her so excited and hope you could spend more time together. You wake up in the middle of the night to find the 2 love letters you'd stuffed in your jacket have fallen onto the floor in your bed. You read them, and the harasser writes about being unable to hold back her feelings, and every time she sees you at school, her heart races. Jealousy is starting to bleed through the writing too, as she asks about the girl always around you, who is clearly Ako. Do you like her? Or is she just a friend? Why can't you look at me more? She also mentions leaving chocolates in your locker as a present and asks what club you're planning to join next year. But unfortunately, you still can't find a single clue about who she is. You think Ako might be able to help since she's popular and knows everyone. But if Ako found out about the letters, she'd probably get the wrong idea. So you decide to figure this out on your own. Just as you're about to go back to sleep, you hear the sound of breaking glass from downstairs. Thinking that you might have forgotten to lock the door, you go downstairs to check and find the front door unlocked. You look around, find nothing, lock it up, and head back to bed. For the past week, you haven't slept properly because of the same reason. Always woken by the same strange sounds in the middle of the night. On top of that, you've started having nightmares, vivid ones where you feel like someone is watching you. You convince yourself it's just you being paranoid, a side effect of being stressed out by the harasser situation. You talk yourself down and go back to sleep. The next day, you show up to school exhausted, and Ako, sitting right next to you, notices immediately. When class ends, you don't want Ako to find out about the locker situation, so you make an excuse to leave first. You tell her you need to speak to the teacher about the assignment and promise to meet her at the school entrance later. You then head to your locker, and as expected, it's full of love letters. You hide them all away, make a quick pit stop in a restroom, then go to meet Ako. On the walk home, Ako drops a hint she's not entirely aware of, offering to always be available if you ever need help with schoolwork. To avoid an awkward moment, you shift the topic and try your luck again, asking if she wants to go somewhere before heading home. Again, Ako has to turn you down. Her father is out of town, and during those times, she's not allowed to go out after school. She explains that ever since her father got a promotion, he's been traveling overseas frequently, and his rule is that she comes home immediately after school when he's away. You can only understand Ako's situation. After all, you've met Ako's father before and know how protective the man is. Before you knew it, you arrive at the intersection together with Ako and said your goodbye. Back at home, you notice that Ako was acting kind of strange, though you decided not to think too much about it. You then go to your bed to get some rest. You're woken up again in the middle of the night by the same sound of breaking glass from downstairs. And when you check, you found nothing. You felt that you must be hearing things because you're sleep-deprived and really need to get some rest. You then went back to bed. The next morning, Ako doesn't come to school. That's unusual for her, since she's the kind of person who shows up even when she's not feeling well. Thinking that Ako might be really sick, you decide to go check on her and bring her a copy of the assignment from the teacher. It's been a long time since you last visited her house, but when you ring the doorbell and wait for a while, you don't get any response, at least not until Ako opens the door, just as you were about to slip the assignment under it. She looks fine, and she thanks you for being so considerate. And since you're here, she insists you come in for some tea, leaving you no choice but to accept. You sit and talk, getting so absorbed in conversation that you don't notice how much time has passed, and Ako realizes she forgot to actually make the tea. While she heads to the kitchen, you wander around the house. You notice a black cat on the roof, and without thinking much of it, end up stepping into Ako's bedroom. Instead of leaving right away, you start messing around with her computer, which causes it to crash with a fatal error. You then back out of the room and pretend as if nothing happened. Ako catches you in the hallway, but thankfully doesn't seem to notice what just happened. She tells you the tea is ready. Back at the table, you sip the tea while Ako asks what's been going on with you. She says that you seem different lately, like something is distracting you, and you keep coming to class looking tired. You say you just haven't been sleeping well, but from the look on Ako's face, she clearly knows you're hiding something. So, you take another sip of tea and try to change the subject, saying you feel a lot better now. An awkward silence settles between you, and you notice Ako is staring at you intensely for some reason. Then, you try to restart the conversation by asking what kind of tea this is, and Ako says it's just regular black tea, or more precisely, black tea with a special ingredient added. She hopes you like it. Ako then shifts to something heavier. She says you felt distant lately, like your mind is always somewhere else, and that things between you aren't as close as they used to be. Every time you brush it off and say that's not true, Ako looks less and less convinced until she starts questioning whether you're even still friends. You reassure her you are. Ako softens a little, admitting she just doesn't want to be alone and that she sometimes worries you'll end up hating her. Once you clear the misunderstanding, Ako asks you to visit her more often because she genuinely enjoys spending time with you. You promised, but you're still aware of how intensely she's staring at you. So you ask if there's something else she wanted to talk about. That's when the questions get strange. She asked what you end up thinking about when you start spacing out at school. And she asked where you actually went yesterday when he said you needed help from the teacher. You say you really did go to the teacher, but Ako calls you a liar. She says she's been thinking about you a lot lately, about how you always lie to protect her feelings, and how you've been going out of your way to avoid her. At first, she thought maybe you were just bored, and she had already started preparing herself to accept that you couldn't be friends anymore. But that's when she starts to notice something. When you said you're going to see the teacher, Ako quietly followed you to the locker area and watched you hide the love letters. She now believes the reason you keep pulling away is that there was another girl, and you're trying to hide that girl from her. She thought she could accept it, since you were just friends after all, but when she imagined you with someone else, it made her want to cry. It didn't feel fair, since she's the one that's known you the longest. After putting everything on the table, she asks you directly, do you genuinely care about her, Or are you just spending time with her because you feel obligated to? In this situation, you know you need to clear this misunderstanding. But first, the game asks you something. Do you still have feelings for Ako, or have they faded? This choice determines the ending. After choosing one of the options, you start to lose focus. And you notice that your hands begin to shake and you're sweating intensely. You can't move your body and feel completely exhausted. You look at Ako and realize something strange in her expression. Ako says the medicine she added to the tea has finally kicked in. She tells you not to worry. It's not poison. She just couldn't stop thinking about you, about the two of you. Half conscious, you hear Ako telling you not to worry, that everything will be better when you wake up. You wake up locked in a dark cell and have to find a way out. Realizing there was something on top of a shelf that might be useful, you climb the shelf. You climb the shelf by standing on a chair, and you find a flashlight that lets you see into a dark opening leading to the next room, where you use a wire to retrieve a key to the cell door. With this, you manage to get out, use a wooden rod to move the heavy furniture blocking the doorway, and discover you've been held in a hidden room inside Ako's house, sealed behind a large cabinet. The room is directly next to Ako's bedroom. The exit is blocked by an iron gate, with a combination lock requiring a 6-digit combination. You have no idea what Ako is planning and want to believe this is all some kind of joke, expecting Ako to pop out and say that she's just messing with you. But you know Ako doesn't have that sense of dark humor, leaving you no choice but to search for clues. Just then, the black cat from before shows up. It reminds you of the photo Ako sent you. You reach down to pet it, and the cat thanks you, which makes you surprised. A talking cat, you thought, losing your mind. The cat confirms this is all real and says Ako accepts it when she found out. It also seems to know everything, including the fact that you and Ako are in love with each other. Seeing that you still have questions, it offers to answer whatever you want to know. You decide to ask where Ako is. The cat says she's gone out and urges you to escape as fast as you can, because the last time I saw Ako, she looked quite distraught. It doesn't know exactly what happened to her, but she's been crying frequently over the past few days. The only way out is through the padlocked gate, and while the cat doesn't know the code, it remembers that after bringing you here, Ako was seen tearing pages out of her diary book. The cat knows the diary means everything to Ako because there were times Ako would talk to it about her life. So the cat knows that the diary is the best place to start looking. You search the house and eventually find all 5 diary entries. On the first entry, Ako explains that a black cat, since her name, has visited her again and suggested her to write down her thoughts. She writes the first entry as an introduction, but closes it by expressing confusion that the cat can actually talk and can't wait to see you again. Second entry, Ako writes that earlier at school, you asked her if she had been leaving letters in your locker. When she said no, you looked a little embarrassed. She had no idea what you meant. So after school, she asked the cat, who suggested you might have been hoping she was the one sending them. Third entry. Ako starts noticing that your behavior has changed. You've been acting really strange lately, that she's starting to worry. Every time she asks, you keep telling her that nothing is wrong. Fourth entry. Ako writes about the day she quietly followed you to the locker area. She couldn't understand why you kept lying to her, saying that you didn't go to see the teacher like you said. After you took what was inside your locker and headed to the restroom, she noticed a letter that had fallen on the floor. She picked it up, and that's when her suspicions were confirmed. And lastly, in the fifth entry, Ako writes that she doesn't know what to do anymore. Things have only gotten worse day by day. You barely talk to her, hiding something. She understands your attitude has changed because you're hiding a girl from her, and she can't accept the idea that you'll love someone else more than her. Maybe you don't care if she notices, but what if you hate her? You're the only one left for her. The more she thinks about it, the more unbearable it feels. And for that, she promises herself that she'll do something before you leave her behind alone. This is the point where Ako planned the kidnapping. At the bottom of the entry is a note detailing her plan to move all the diary content onto her computer. The password, she writes, is based on the number of books in a room. With that information, you access Ako's computer and find the 6-digit combination that you can use to unlock the gate. Before you can step outside, Ako arrives home and begs you not to leave. At this point, you don't believe a single word Ako said as she tried to convince you to stay with her and said that everything will be fine. Ako insists on explaining herself, saying she loves you, and explains that locking you here is the only way she could think of to protect what she has. Even when you tell her you were never planning to leave her, Ako doesn't believe you. She's convinced you're lying just to get back to the mystery girl. Realizing Ako has lost her mind, you try to push past her toward the exit. Ako pulls out a knife and swings at you, forcing you to dodge. With no good options left, you retreat back into the cell. Ako knows you have nowhere to run, so she heads to her bedroom to get the key to the cell, which gives you a chance to slip out. But the moment you step out of the room, you find Ako already waiting outside. You bolt down the stairs toward the front door. Then you hear a loud crash from the stairway. You go back to look. Ako has fallen down the stairs and lost consciousness. Part of you is worried, but another part suspects it might be a trap. This is where the game splits into its 3 endings. This ending occurs if previously in the dining room, where you are rethinking your feelings for Ako, you choose the second option. Not sure if you still have the same feeling towards Ako. Then, when Ako fell down the stairs, check on Ako's condition. You notice blood on the floor and realize she's really hurt. You call an ambulance from a neighbor's phone, and Ako was immediately rushed to the hospital. A couple of days later, you visit her at the hospital. Just before you open the door to her room, a doctor pulls you aside and tells you more about her condition. The doctor explains that Ako suffered a pretty severe concussion and has lost some short-term memory as a result. Fortunately, the tests show that she'll make a full recovery, but she may struggle to recall things from the past few weeks. After hearing all of this, you decided to meet Ako. But before that, you begin to doubt yourself. Would your presence cause her condition worse? Well, you were wrong. As soon as you stepped inside, the first thing she did was smile at you, an expression of thanks for your visit. As the doctor said, Ako had lost her memory until a couple of weeks ago. And so in this meeting, Ako was completely back to her old self, talking to you for hours. You can't believe that this was the same girl who imprisoned you and almost killed you for escaping. You decide, for now, not to tell her what happened. You also swore to never tell anyone else of what she did. Part of you feels responsible, because if you'd been honest with Ako about your feelings from the start, none of this would have happened. Besides, now you know for certain that the feelings you have for Ako is mutual. She likes you back. When Ako recovered, you plan to tell her everything about the other girl, about your own feelings, and everything. Of course, you'll leave out the more disturbing details. 1 week later, you visit Ako at home to check on her condition. She says she's feeling much better, and the doctor even said she should be well enough to go back to school by the end of the week. Both of you then chatted casually, and you took a sip of the tea. Ako asked, "What have you been doing since she's been in the hospital?" And you realized that Ako was asking this question with all seriousness. So even though you had actually spent the past few days cleaning up any trace of what had happened that night on her house, considering that Ako's father would be home soon, you decided to lie and come up with another excuse, not wanting Ako to know about the incident. But before you can even answer Ako's question, your body starts reacting the same way it did before. Your body couldn't move, your hands are shaking, and sweat is pouring down your face. Ako's expression shifts, and she tells you that it doesn't matter if you answer or not. You'll be spending a lot of time together from now on, and this time, she'll be extra careful not to let anything happen again. She'll make sure you don't escape again, running with another girl. You try to speak, but nothing came out. You don't understand how she got her memory back. Before you can process any of it, the drowsiness and vertigo hit, and you lose consciousness, thinking it's only a matter of time before you're dead. Waking up, you find yourself tied up in a prison cell with Ako in front of you. This is the first bad ending, together forever. This ending occurs if you run away when Ako falls down the stairs. You were sure that it was just another one of Ako's traps. Then, you ran as fast as you could and went home. Still in shock to process anything about what just happened, for the next several minutes, you're just sitting down in your room in silence, listening for any strange sounds. After calming down, you decided to go to sleep, convincing yourself it wasn't real, that when you woke up, it would turn out to have been a nightmare. Yes, that must have been it. The sound of breaking glass wakes you in the middle of the night. This time, you're certain there's someone outside making this noise. You go out to check and find nothing, and when you turn back toward your bedroom, you find your room dark, and as soon as you turn on the lights, Ako is already inside the room. Without saying a word, she stabs you in the stomach. The pain is so intense that you're unable to even let out a scream. Your vision then immediately darkens. As you fall to the floor, unable to break the fall with your hands, you know well that probably you're not going to make it. And as you're bleeding out on the floor, you can feel Ako patting your head, whispering, "You don't have to worry anymore. I'll take care of you. Just go to sleep, and everything will be okay." Before you fully perish, you're able to make out one final sentence from the girl who is standing over you. "Wait for me. I promise. I won't be far behind you." This is the second bad ending, murder-suicide. What Ako says at the end is an implication. After killing you, Ako takes her own life to be with you. This ending also confirms that those glass-breaking sounds were made by Ako. The true ending occurs if previously in the dining room, when you were rethinking your feelings for Ako, you chose the first option, which you still love Ako. Then, when Ako fell down the stairs, check on Ako's condition. The story then plays out exactly as the first bad ending up through the hospital visit. But a week later, when you visit Ako at home, you work up a nerve to ask directly whether she's gotten her memory back. She shakes her head, and you exhale, feeling a wave of relief. Ako asks if you'll walk her to school on her first day back, if it's not too much trouble. And you say yes, absolutely. Promise that this time, you're definitely not going to let her down. You continue talking for a while longer, finish the meal together, and say the usual goodbyes. On the way home, you ruminate on everything that's happened. Despite the traumatic events that had passed a few weeks ago, you really don't think you can forget them. You still have to take some time to relax, but on the other hand, you also have to help Ako as much as you can. In the post-credit scene, you keep your promise to walk to school together. You show up at Ako's house on her first day back, and she immediately asks you to go inside, saying she prepared lunch for you both since you brought food for her every day when she was in the hospital. And she had asked you to grab the food from the fridge while she finishes getting ready. In the kitchen, you run into the same black cat that had previously helped you. But when you try to talk to it, the cat just meows, unable to talk back in human language. You try to get the cat to talk, but it's just staring at you, realizing that it's just a cat, and there's no way it can actually talk. Must have been your imagination. After you grab the bento boxes, watch some TV, and eventually go upstairs to check on Ako since she's taking a while, you find her standing completely still, staring blankly at the shelf that used to cover the cell room. You snap her out of it, and she apologizes for making you wait. Even though you feel something is off, you shrug it off and ask her to go to school together. From that point on, things slowly return to normal. Once again, you did the usual routine of walking home from school together. As time passed by, your relationship grew stronger every day, and you became certain that Ako feels the same way you do. You love Ako, but you still don't know how or when you'll actually say it. But you're certain that an opportunity will present itself. As for the other girl, at some point, the letters just stopped coming. Perhaps it was a prank, or maybe she gave up, and it's just a fleeting, unrequited romance. Regardless, it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you're going to spend as much time as possible with Ako. And whatever happens next, you're never, ever looking back. This is the true ending. Happiness. After reaching the true ending, players can unlock bonus content by naming the protagonist endgame, a code assembled from the red letters that appear across all 3 endings in sequence. True End, Bad End 1, and lastly Bad End 2. The extra content takes us behind the scenes of Ako, a Yandere Love Story, which will also be an explanation chapter. The developer reveals that the identity of the mysterious girl is a brown-haired female student. She can be spotted in the school hallway, and when you approach her, she clearly gets nervous. The developer also shares details that were planned but ultimately cut, including a blonde male student who was originally designed as your friend. He was going to help you figure out who the mystery girl was, but ended up impressing the mystery girl and winning her over, resolving the love triangle between you, Ako, and the other girl. That storyline was eventually dropped. As for Ako, the developer explains that being left alone at home so frequently, with both parents regularly traveling overseas, she unknowingly developed a deep fear of being alone. So when she realized that you, her childhood best friend, were hiding something from her, and specifically when she mistaken it as you were pursuing another girl, the anxiety set in. The more you try to hide the letters from a mystery girl, the more worried Ako became. Eventually, Ako experienced a mental breakdown, and she went to extreme lengths to keep you from leaving, poisoning you, locking you inside a prison cell, and quote-unquote, taking care of you in her own way. If you resist, she would not hesitate to kill and die together. The Night of Terror ended with Ako falling down the stairs and suffering a severe concussion that the doctor said resulted in short-term memory loss. But the developer then reveals the truth. Ako never lost her memory. She remembered everything, from a shift in your behavior all the way through that night. She pretended to forget so her actions would never be revealed. As for you, the protagonist, there isn't much else to reveal. You liked Ako and had been planning to confess from the beginning, but getting the letters from a mysterious girl made you want to resolve that first before asking her out. You wanted things to go perfectly. The developer also mentions that he originally wanted you to be a silent protagonist, since he enjoys games where the main character doesn't speak, but found that the game became too boring that way. Then, walking out of the bonus room, you encounter the black cat one final time. In this conversation, the cat explains everything. It thanks you for playing the game, because you're the one who helped it find a path where you and Ako could find happiness. The cat explains that it has been running the same loop over and over, try to engineer a happy outcome for the two of you, and always failing. Then, one cycle showed it something new. Your character acted differently, and that change came from you, the player. That's when a cat understood it wasn't the only one who could manipulate fate, but you, as a player, could do that too by getting one of the 3 endings provided. Since realizing that, the cat has been dying to meet you. It then explains its real reason for wanting you and Ako to be happy. It's a demon that owes a debt to its superior. Most humans just assume that demons exist to spread suffering and feast on their misery. That's true, but that's the job of lesser demons. This cat has a task beyond that, namely helping 2 humans find the happiness of love before it brings disaster upon them both. That way, the pain they would have to endure will be much greater. That's the entire reason it spent so long trying to guide you and Ako toward each other. After countless failures, it finally completed its mission with your help. After saying all of this, the cat thanks you and says it will make sure you cannot interfere with the relationship between the protagonist and Ako ever again. Throughout this conversation, we know that the identity behind the black cat is none other than a demon. After helping the protagonist and Ako find happiness, he will later bring disaster upon them both. And we can conclude that, after all, there was never a happy ending for both you and Ako. And that's the story of Ako, a Yandere Love Story. A game that starts off as a familiar romance story and ends up being a horror story. In the end, this story is all about a girl who was always alone, who found the one person that made the loneliness bearable, and then watched him slowly pull away without explanation. The more you think about it, the more you realize none of this had to happen. What they need is just one honest conversation. That's all. But instead, two people stayed quiet, and the silence did what silence always does. It filled itself with something worse. And even when you finally reach the ending, which the game calls happiness, there's a cat in the corner reminding you that it was all part of a plan. This makes it feel like the only thing you call happiness is just a borrowed thing, which can be taken away at any time. Maybe that's the real thing that this game tries to convey, the cost of waiting too long to say the things that matter.